Now we're being recorded. Got it.
Yes.
Okay, so minutes. Any questions about the minutes or comments or
I have just one comment, and that is that I would really like to see follow-up with Corbett's. I don't, Corbett's, Lou and Lois Corbett in their presentation. I'd like to kind of stay on that and because they're in a desperate situation, and I just think it bears our diligence to stay with them in their appeal.
Well, I agree with you completely, Lisa. Joe, you want to weigh in here?
exactly? Have they had any contact with you?
Yeah. So actually, Doug and I visited their home last week for a follow-up discussion, and the discussion was, I would say, generally very high level about water infrastructure, but mostly the purpose of the meeting was to discuss with them options for sourcing potable water through existing town policies and helping walk through the regulatory process of siting a new well location. We looked at the parcels in the neighborhood, had a bit of a walk around, and I think left them with more guidance than they had. Certainly a higher level of familiarity with town policy and what their options were. So I'm hopeful that in the short term, they'll have luck putting a new well in, although I believe that's really their only option at this point, given the need for potable water soon. The scale with which there could be any larger infrastructure project, I don't think would meet their needs. So, it's certainly part of the broader discussion about what do we do with compromised areas like theirs. I'm really happy that they came forward because I sense from my subsequent discussion with them that there are many neighbors, particularly in that area and perhaps across the island, that are having similar problems that just aren't as vocal about it. So it's really helpful to get that kind of feedback, and I appreciate their honesty. I think as a group is particularly helpful to understand that perhaps when a couple comes forth like that, or any homeowner comes forth like that, it's safe to assume there's many other people, probably a multiple of others, feeling the same way and having the same challenge, but just aren't coming forward to speak about it.
Yeah, and I would also
hold on a second, Doug. Doug, hold on a second. Thank you, Joe. And Lisa acknowledged, and thank you. I mean, I think that Joe's brief review that we've inserted in here is helpful. I agree that Doug and Lisa, I agree that follow-up, that's not enough follow-up. However, we're trying to approve our minutes. Are there any other thoughts about the minutes? Motion to approve? Okay, all in favor? Great, minutes are approved. We can move on to our agenda. Now we have Tim here with us, and he can only stay with us until 2:30. So usually we would go straight to the water supply, just quick review of our water supply and rainfall. However, I'm going to flip those two items so that we go right into where I think we want to be, and where you guys, I think, had already started before I got onto the Zoom call. So Lisa, I'm going to now hand it over to you to introduce how you wish the fertilizer discussion.
Okay. Well, we've met 3 times. The group, and it varies in number, anywhere from 8 to 12 people. Lots of great discussion, lots of good input. So the consensus of the group is the primary objective should be homeowner education. But we discussed the fact that putting a brochure out to the public, or information out to the public, the town really needs to have in the code acknowledgement that this is an issue. So there needs to be language in the code specifically for fertilizer. We looked through the code and it's all over the place with regards to fertilizer. It's in different headings. So we proposed a regulation template, if you will, based on the fertilizer regulations that we saw from Massachusetts and Florida. And we kind of drew up a prototype for Shelter Island. So it's really in the preliminary stage here. And I'm going to talk about the regulation, but Tim, did you want to talk about the brochure since your time is limited?
It's really just again, I just want to say
Ken, if you could mute yourself while we're, put yourself on mute for a second, Ken, so that, and Ken? you hear me? If you could just put yourself on mute, you were interrupting, the background sound was interrupting. Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
the draft that was sent out was overdraft. So that's not, the intention is not to include all that information. So when Lisa sent out the draft to all of you, the idea was that you would all take a look at it and decide what was essential to go into a brochure, which has limited space, and what we could take out of it, and either would go into code or go into other sort of way of communicating if we felt it necessary. So that's it. So Lisa, you said you've received some feedback from several people, I guess via email.
Yeah, Howard Johansson sent in his recommendations to the draft of the brochure, and Dave Ruby sent in his recommendations to the draft. So I think at this point, it's taking those suggestions and incorporating them with you and Lynn, and coming up with sort of a second edition of the brochure. I think that
Okay.
that's where we are. I didn't receive anything from anybody else. And their suggestions are good, you know, they're substantial. And yeah, so I'm just gonna take the time here to say, do you and Lynn want to undertake that? To rework the, okay?
Yes.
And
we
then
Yes.
will do that.
I'll
Go ahead,
forward
Lynn.
you their suggestions.
Just,
Does
it-
anyone
Um,
have any other questions about? the
Yeah,
brochure?
so that's what I wanted to ask. Does anybody right now have any other suggestions? And if you haven't had a chance to really look at them carefully, take the time and just send them to Lisa. And then Lynn and I can get everything, all the suggestions. Which would be great, getting them all in sort of at once versus a drip. And we could try to put together something in the next couple of weeks.
Could I
Great.
ask that, just because I was away and I haven't looked at that much, there's 3 documents in the email, and one is certainly the brochure. And the second is the proposed legislation. Am I right so far? And
Yes.
the third, was that kind of like a schedule of what the committee was going to do? I wasn't sure what the third document was supposed to be.
What is-
You know,
what
a
is it?
brochure
What's on
or
the top
proposed
there, Greg?
legislation?
What is on the top of that? I sent it, I don't.
I'll take a look, hold on. Smart fertilizer use pamphlet.
Right, I believe that came from, that's the first draft that we worked with. So that's the draft that people were working off of to make suggestions. So that was the first draft, and then the fertilizer homeowners guide is actually the last draft, if you will, that Tim and Lynn developed from that very first guide. I included the first guide because it seemed like it was an outline. It was easier to make recommendations off of. And then what Tim and Lynn sent was which was a little bit more specific. And they borrowed language from pamphlets that we got from various places around the country. Again, Martha's Vineyard, Islands, and Tim, I don't remember where else.
Rhode Island, forget where, Nantucket.
Mhm.
Anyway, so, yep.
Well,
All right, that makes sense to me then. It was just that third document was like, okay, that looks like. Look, it was a kind of a timeline or an index of what was in the brochure. So
Yes, I apologize. I didn't really,
yeah, Lisa, I also apologize because I don't feel like somehow I feel like I'm a step behind here. I don't feel like I saw that email with 3 documents attached to it. I had an earlier email from you with 6 documents attached. Maybe it went astray. Maybe I just missed where it is. But it seems like we have 3 documents, 2 documents that we are needing to work on,
mhm.
neither of which are posted on our WAC discussion documents page yet. correct?
Um,
Well, a legislative document and a brochure.
right, well, when you say posted, I'm not sure what you mean.
So we have discussion documents section of the WAC page.
Okay,
And, you know, typically we want to have everything we're working on there so that
right.
members.
You're probably right, Peter. That's on me. I just returned today, but I'll get them up today.
Okay, great. So yeah, we want, that'll give us a sort of centralized place, and as they're updated, we can know, rather than searching through old emails, we can know what we're commenting on. And so, yeah, so we'll have those two documents, the legislative document that Lisa was talking about and the brochure kind of document that she was throwing over to Tim to discuss. We'll have them on our discussion documents section of the WAC page, and that way we can all comment on the same thing. And I would, you know, let's
I don't know why you
plan
didn't-
in the next week to be during this week before Christmas to look at that and send our comments to Lisa and Tim and Lynn. Doug.
You just answered my question, Peter, to Tim, Lisa, and whom else?
Lynn Weikart, who's also with us. And Lynn,
Right.
do you have your email? Do you want to, I mean, let's make sure on these documents to post the committee members and the, you know, responsible people that you ought to, you know, who to get back to.
Hey, can I just say that also, I'm not sure, Lisa, that we need to send out the first,
No,
so just, and it's the one that's marked 11/24/23 draft.
right.
It actually says that at the top of the page. That's the
Tim.
draft you should look at.
Okay.
And my hope was that today, everyone would have had a chance to look through these so we could have the discussion. That's what I thought we were going to be doing today.
Mhm.
So
Okay, but
I am assuming that that's not the case, that,
I think we could just go, Tim and I can just go make sure we have another draft. That's one document. And we'll take everybody's suggestions and we'll present another draft at the next meeting.
okay,
so yes, we'll do it at the next at your next meeting. So if
Uh,
everybody could just gives you a little bit of
And
time.
Lynn and Tim, you're talking about the draft of a brochure.
The draft of the brochure, the
Mhm.
fertilizers, a homeowner guide, the 11/24 draft.
All right. And Catherine, you're with us and you're going to make sure that we've got that on our
Yes,
discussion.
understood and noted.
Cool.
and Catherine, I sent that to her to screen share today. But
I have them available whenever you're ready, Lisa.
if we don't want to screen share, because
I would be in favor, given that I feel like we do want to keep the discussion moving forward. And yes, it's better for people to take it home and read it and to have the time. Nevertheless, putting things on screen and just, you know, orienting ourselves.
Okay, so maybe Tim and Lynn, you could just very quickly run down this since we have it here.
Yeah.
So people
it
have
up
a better idea of what you're doing.
Yep,
Go
pull it
ahead,
up.
Tim. Tim, go ahead.
Oh, am I gonna share?
It's on the screen. Oh, Tim, wait, you're on your phone, right?
No, I'm not. I'm on Zoom, but I have a really wonky computer right now. So Catherine, if you have the document? Yeah, there we
She's
go.
got it up
It's
and it's
up.
screen shared.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so the idea is just to have again, the writing is all rough here, but the idea is just have an intro, explain the benefits of fertilizers if properly used, etc. And why we need to be careful about them if they're not properly used. And then we have the pie chart. So one question I had was, should we add the golf courses in agriculture are exempt from this? People looking at might think, why aren't we focusing on agriculture and golf courses?
I think you would want to leave it there because people are going to say, what about golf courses?
I think we should say something.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think the title of that pie chart should probably be a little bit more specific, sources of nitrogen.
Yes, it will be, Greg. Again, this is just, I'm just throwing
Yeah.
stuff up there.
Right. And Tim, I'm not trying to interrupt your flow, but Meg's had her hand up and I just wonder if Meg, did you want to put a comment into the
Go ahead.
discussion or wait?
Yeah, just for the pie chart, I just sent out another graphic that has pie charts for each watershed of Shelter Island. So it shows you the breakdown for each watershed. So it really does show that the big three contributors for most of the island are septic systems, atmospheric, and lawns. So you can decide if you want to use that graphic or not. It's labeled nitrogen load by source, and then it kind of breaks it down. So you can see in the areas of the island where golf courses are a big part and where it's mostly going to be lawns, septic systems, and atmospheric deposition. So you can check that out. It should be in your email.
Okay, we will.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, this chart is actually from the Nature Conservancy and it's not up to date. So I would welcome any up to date, more pertinent, a better pie chart, actually. Okay. And then the fertilizer facts, a lot of this first bunch of information actually comes from the Suffolk County site. And I thought to get that sort of right up front, that actually Suffolk County does have regulations about when and when you can't add fertilizer, about licensing, homeowners checking with their contractor to be sort of licenses up to date, best management practices. Do we need to explain what best management practices are? We can do that. That retail stores are required to post Suffolk County signs and brochures about the correct times for application and use of fertilizers. Having your lawn tested. For instance, if you have phosphorus, you don't need to ask phosphorus. And actually I had a conversation with, I think at our last fertilizer meeting with Walter Richards about phosphorus, which I will sort of try to get a better understanding of. And then I think at one of our meetings, I think one of you, it might have been Andrew, suggested that people should know what's actually in a bag of fertilizer. So again, this is all from Martha's Vineyard. It does not have to be this long, but I think the idea is a good one, and we can come up with our own graphic and try to condense the information.
All right, and Tim, again, since you name checked Andrew and he has his hand up at the same time.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah.
So back at the pie chart.
Yeah, go to the pie chart. Yep.
Yeah, the real point is fertilizer, while it's not the largest contributor, it's controllable.
Correct.
And this document provides important information about how to get the benefits of fertilizer and not damage the environment.
Yes.
I would delete the pie chart, because what the pie chart could say to a cynical reader is, why do we care about something that's only 5.7% when agriculture is exempt at 16.7 and cesspools and septic tanks is an entirely different problem? So I think the pie chart actually, the graphic message of the pie chart is this isn't important. So that's an editorial view. I think there are other graphics probably in this message that will help us get our point across and get people to change their behavior.
Well, I think we should take a look at Meg's pie charts before we
Yeah.
decide what to do with the pie chart.
Yep.
Okay, fine.
I
A
agree.
very good comment. I'm sure the committee will be thinking about your comment there.
Yeah, but we've got to be intellectually honest about this. Otherwise, this is just proselytizing.
Okay.
No, but I think you put the sentence in there that says, look, it's certainly not the biggest contributor, but to improve the quality of our waterways, this is, everything matters, and this does matter.
And it's controllable, as you said.
And it's controllable.
Yeah, which we have that sentence in there, but okay, we can let's look at. I agree.
Move along, Tim. Let's keep Tim going because he has a 2:30 hard.
Okay, so and then moving on beyond the what's in your bag, your fertilizer bag. Sorry.
That's good.
And then there are other things here: manage irrigation, mowing height, leave leaf clippings on the lawn. For homeowners in near shore wetland properties, plant a buffer zone. So the question is, do we want to include all that information? I think Walter had sort of a feeling that some of it may be more than you want to put in a brochure.
Mm.
But again, you can think about that when you look at it more closely. And then there's a calculation chart, which I think Greg, you and Andrew discussed that at our first fertilizer meeting, that people should sort of have an idea of sort of not overriding the landscape contractor, but sort of checking the landscape contractor by knowing what should go in the lawn and being able to quiz their contractor. Again, I don't know how much you can expect from a homeowner to do, how much homework you can expect them to do.
Hmm. And again, that depends on the homeowner and how seriously, they're
Correct.
interested in this.
It does.
But the value of this is also for new homeowners who have no idea about taking care of a lawn or anything like that at all. This is excellent information for them to be able to put things into perspective. Otherwise, they are just relying on what a contractor tells them.
Correct.
I think one of the objectives is we're of two minds. We talked about this. Do we want to make it simple enough that people are going to actually pay attention and read it? And enough for them to pay attention and read, or do we want to make it more filled with detail where they're going to look at it, their eyes will glaze over and they'll just say, yeah, okay, later, and then which goes to not at all.
But
So we've sort of been trying to balance that, make it not too complicated, but provide good information. And I think that's
So
what.
if I could
Tim did.
comment on that, on Lisa's point, or suggest, one way to square that circle is to have a link, a single place on the town website that the brochure refers you to, that has more detailed answers to some of the questions. So that you can limit the depth of the brochure to a degree, and frequently refer within the brochure to, for more information, you can go to, and then,
Yes, because at the end, I provided a space for links, not only to the town, but to Suffolk County and other places for more information.
Mhm.
I would agree with Lisa that you don't want people's brains to shut off immediately when they open up the page. And I don't want to make the type so small to cram in a lot of information, which is another sort of turnoff. If there's like lots and lots of words and it's a tiny type, people just tend not to read it. Okay, should we mention our sandy soil allows for faster flow? This is sort of, again, information that could go in a link. Should we recommend not fertilizing for heavy rainfall? Is there a difference between organic and regular fertilizer? That might be something we should put in. Should we recommend particular grass types for drought tolerance? And then helpful links. We can add more links and websites. Do we want to add a list of Shelter Island licensed fertilizer contractors? I don't think there's room in a brochure, but that could be for the link. And we can add more sources. And I forget what comes after this. Catherine, was there more? Oh, okay. Yeah, there is. No, is that the end
No.
of it?
Seems to be,
That's
that's the
the
bottom of
end
the
of it.
page.
Okay.
Okay.
Let Andrew, you have your hand up.
Okay, so this is a really stupid question.
There are no
And-
stupid questions.
All right, if I'm a homeowner and I'm putting fertilizer on my lawn, what I really want to know is where I should set the density on my spreader.
Yep.
Because I don't care about the math. The number of pounds that I am putting down as a function of my lawn size, which I don't know, and my survey is like buried in the file drawer somewhere, and I'm not going to get that out and take out this. I'm not going to do all that. I just want to know where to set the density, the application lever. So, sorry to be stupid, but
No.
is there a way to take the math through to that point?
There's, when we look through the information, there's such a plethora of information about broadcasting and shields on your broadcasting machine. And there's regulations about that, so that when fertilizer is broadcasted in a machine, it doesn't go into the neighbor, it doesn't go into an impermeable surface. I mean, there's so much information. And in my estimation, that would be something that would be at another link. You know, like a how-to.
Can I make a point?
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I find lacking is the idea that the fertilizer applications vary as to where in the island there's being spread. There's no more area which is more sensitive than the near shore areas, particularly waterfront homeowners. And this is where the runoff occurs, like in the rains we're just having. If we're done in the summer, we just recently, scattered fertilizer around. So to me, that chart of 5.7 or whatever it may be, that may be on an average. But if you were to take a look at just the near shore area with a waterfront homeowner, it could be much greater proportion within that particular neighborhood that goes into the bay. That's my only comment.
Perhaps Meg's multiple pie charts will help us with that. I also agree. I want to second Ken's comment that there would, Tim, you were talking before about if there's high phosphorus, you don't need to put in phosphorus. And in fact, it is very local. It is very much a neighborhood by neighborhood consideration. Phosphorus is precisely what we're most sensitive to around fresh pond. So for us, the elimination of phosphorus from your nitrogen, from your fertilizer mix, and also given that we've got in our water, in our groundwater, enormous amounts of both nitrogen and phosphorus. So anyway, the point being that as we, I think that it is really important to use links intelligently, to refer back to the map, basically, in different neighborhoods. You might want to consider this, or this.
Could definitely mention neighborhoods. That was a good idea. We could mention neighborhoods, just what you brought out.
And to the degree that we have specifics about those neighborhoods,
right,
so that we're referring them to that information. It's also really great when, once you have somebody going to a link, it means they're becoming active. They're becoming active on this subject. They're not just glancing at a brochure. Meg has got her hand up. Meg? You there, Meg?
Sorry, I was muted. If you want, I can do a screen share and just show you the map that I emailed, just so everyone has an idea if they even want to use it. Okay,
Be
so
really
let me
good.
just, I'll do that now.
One thing is, as we're talking about this, I think we need to sort of prepare two things, three things. There's the code, but also to prepare a brochure, but also at the same time prepare a link. I mean, information that would be in a link simultaneously, so that we have an idea of how the two things will work together, the brochure and then the information in the link.
Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Fertilizer golf courses jumps right up for Dave Ruby.
Yeah, so you can see how it varies from place to place. Like Mashomick is obviously very low. It's just wastewater, but mostly atmospheric nitrogen. And then, in the areas with golf courses, those jump up. But most places it's wastewater, lawns, and atmospheric. So it's kind of an interesting visual.
I think it's very important to remember that golf courses, it's fertilizer. It's pesticides and fertilizer in golf courses. So it's not like fertilizer on lawns and agriculture or golf courses are two separate entities. There's just one that's not governed or not able to be governed by the town as far as what they can do and what they can't do, which is we don't have any purview over golf courses. But again, I think it's really important to understand that this is all fertilizer driven. When you look at, like, for example, S12, that's obviously it's Gardner's Bay, I'm assuming. And that's a huge contribution to nitrogen load.
So then septic systems, suddenly that part of the pie chart gets larger than the septic wastewater septic issue.
So I think this is great because it shows you the whole island And even if there are some parts of the island that aren't, you know, like Sylvester or the Conservancy, that aren't contributing, it still gives you a really good visual of, I think it's great.
I
It is
really
great.
liked it.
Although I just want to say to Andrew's question about the pie chart originally, again, I think if you look at the number 2 area where the golf course is, people are going to look at that and think, oh, well, here's a place that's using a lot of fertilizer. You know, what about them? So, I mean, I'm just going to raise that question.
Mhm.
33.
All right, so this does, you know, force. you
Question?
guys-
Question on the data.
Andrew, go ahead.
This is nitrogen load by source. Is this what runs off into the surrounding waterway? Or is this what's applied?
I
Meg, you do?
believe it's essentially an analysis of all the nitrogen in that environment and where it's coming from. So
Yeah.
whether it's runoff or not, but
Where did the data come from?
this came from, you know what, I'm gonna have to look. It's from one of the, I think it's from a county document, but I'll
from-
find the
it's-
source and I'll send it to you.
It's from
Okay,
the-
so here's why I'm asking. We all know we've got a proposal in front of us from Gardner's Bay on in expanding the area of irrigation. And they've got a proposal before the DEC. Well, those of us who have been on those field trips have heard them talk about how their application strategy is such that the nitrogen is taken up by the plants and doesn't run off. That pie chart, which shows SI2, which I think that's what it is, in the upper right, if it's runoff, that's very different. If it's application, that aligns with their message.
Hmm.
And I think it's important that we understand what that pie chart really is. If it's contribution of nitrogen to the surrounding water bodies, that's one thing and quite important. Or if it's application of nitrogen to the ground, that's another thing. And I'd like to know I'd like to know what it is.
Good,
Good
good,
point.
good question.
It's not runoff specific, it's nitrogen loading. So it's what the nitrogen that's put into the environment in that area and where it comes from. Not necessarily stating that it's washing off and it's causing a runoff problem. It's just stating that nitrogen found in this area is coming from these sources.
Right. So Andrew's point is very well taken, that we need to be very, very careful with the implications of these various images, graphics, presentations that we're making. You guys really have your work cut out for you in, you know, putting together a very thoughtful document. And I think a very thoughtful document is the only thing that's called for here, not you know, we don't need to bat this out fast. It needs to be something that really stimulates people in the right direction. I don't want to have this discussion go on and on and on and on. I think that
I have to go, actually.
I know that you do.
Sorry to do this.
I would like to just make one.
Sure, I don't want to close
contribution.
it off too quickly either, but so Tim.
Our objective is to have this done by when fertilizer application is legally able to be made, which is April 1st.
Okay.
We want to have this in the hands of the homeowners, in the hands of the contractors, like Walter Richards and Tommy Cronin have stated that they're willing to give them to the homeowners that they interface with. And we'd like to disseminate this information soon, you know, because I think that, and I'm impatient, I'll just tell everybody right now, I hate, you know, to just go on and on and on and nothing happens. So I think if we could set April 1st as our
2:37.
end goal.
We'll be able to do that. And now I do have to run. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much,
everybody.
Tim.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm
And-
going to ask Catherine if she would just screen share the regulation proposals. Can we do that to go over that
Sure.
part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do
sure.
that now.
Okay. Now, again, this was based on regulations that we, samples and that we received from other parts of Massachusetts, Florida, and I think New Jersey was in there, but I'm not sure. And, of course, being another state, towns have more leverage to create their own regulations. And right now, our regulations are stipulated by Suffolk County. So we used a model, and these are the outlines, the headings, if you will, from the model. And the findings and purpose is your justification for even putting this into legislation. And again, I want to really emphasize, and this came up many, many times. It's like, why put another piece of legislation with regards to fertilizer in the town code when there's 75,000 things in there that nobody can enforce anyway? And so our response is, okay, you got to have something. You have to have something to go back to if you're going to encourage homeowners to take this seriously. That town has got to indicate and demonstrate that it is taking it seriously. And there is no one heading in the town code at present that is specific for fertilizer. So that's why we're suggesting this is specific for fertilizer. And then, okay, so just the findings and purpose, what we found was, and maybe Meg can help us out on this. It's the fertilizer from the Long Island Regional Planning Council. It's the second largest source of nitrogen pollution. So that is really, and also, well, I'll get to that later. And then the 2015 Suffolk County Comprehensive Water Sources Management Plan also reiterated and emphasized how nitrogen load from fertilizer needed to be taken seriously and looked at and addressed. The applicability is, again, language that would probably be, that the town attorney would help us with. And this came from Barnstable, Mass. And it was specific in that it's only applies to turf and the application of nitrogen and phosphorus containing fertilizer to turf within the town of SI. If we scroll down, and then this is a legal thing. Who has where do we get the authority? And it's adopted by the town of Shelter Island. Is it a department, a committee? What is legally binding? That's all something that we need to find out from Stephen Kiley. And then the definitions are what the language is used in that piece of legislation and what it actually means. So you can keep scrolling. And this is probably the most important, the best management practices language. And we got this from Chatham and Nantucket. And right now, we operate under Suffolk County timeline as far as fertilizer legislation goes. But if there's a violation, if the neighbor sees a violation, there's no enforcement. There's no local way of dealing with fertilizer because it's in the hands of the county. So we're saying, let's make it local. And these standards of performance are already written into Suffolk County Code, but we would like to make it local. And then the third bullet, and Howard, I know he's on here, and we had a lot of discussion about this, and this was found in the zoning section of the town code. I couldn't even find it, and Howard helped us find it. So certified applicators should not apply fertilizer closer than 100 feet to any water body as defined by the town. And then there are some other places in the code that say 50 feet of a natural area buffer that's specific to the causeway. So you can just kind of disregard that. But I think that we have to make it clear that buffer zone. And do we do it section by section? Should it be near shore areas? Where does it apply? And should it be 100 feet? And there was discussion about, well, if it's 100-foot buffer, there's some lots that are so small that they're never going to be able to adhere to that. There are some, so who makes the, what's the word? Decision. And I think I emailed Meg about this. Is it a planning board decision? It is for subdivision, but was with regards to a new construction. And I don't know if it can be applied to current homes on near shore areas, if we want to make it so that they have to have 100-foot buffer of fertilizer application. And of course, the discussion was, well, who's going to be monitoring this? Who's going to say, oh, I see somebody applying fertilizer and they're only 50 feet, other than your neighbor. So it has to have some teeth to it, but there does have to be something in the code with regards to anything.
It has to be enforceable.
It can be enforceable if it's there. If it's not there.
Right. I'm just saying, if you're going to have a law, it needs to be enforceable. Otherwise, there's no point.
Well, again, I think that what we said is a lot of things in the code are not enforceable, but they're there. If you need to have, if you can enforce them, or if a neighbor or if a homeowners association decides we are going to require that, we're going to make sure this really happens, then if something's in the code, they can comply with that.
Yeah, there's a degree to which self-enforcement is possible, and there's a degree to which just the presence of code changes behavior. So.
Right. The second bullet here, all certified fertilizer applicators should ensure that a copy of the official documentation of certification is readily available. And that is, we talked about, should there be a sticker on a truck? So that if a homeowner or a neighbor, for example, if I see something being applied to my neighbor's lot and I see that the landscaper, their truck, would it be comforting for neighbors to know, and that by looking at a decal, that this is a certified landscaper that's putting this down, who understands all of the rules and all of the regulations and is adhering to them.
Since
So
you're
we-
asking it as a question, I'm going to respond. I like that a lot. This idea of a decal or so just personal response.
Yeah. And then the last one, again, this is already regulation, but we want to make it local. A retailer of fertilizer should post a sign, an informational brochure, which this brochure could be a part of, say, for example, the hardware store where they sell fertilizer. This brochure could be readily available that we're creating so that when people buy their fertilizer, they would have information as well accompanying it. And then the enforcement, this again, it's part of all of the regulations that we looked at, but we're not lawyers. So this is just an example of $300 a day per day for each day of violation within a 12-month period, which really kind of adds up to a lot of money. But it's substantial enough that it would discourage a non-certified applicator. Like if they knew Shelter Island, if somebody sees you putting down fertilizer and you're not certified, and somebody, kind of checks out what you're doing, you could be fined this much.
Mm-hmm.
That may be a stretch, but again, at least it's something. And then the
I
other,
have a question.
sure.
Sorry, just another stupid question. Can homeowners legally apply fertilizer on their own property?
Yes. As far as this is on, well, yeah, they can, because Suffolk County law only applies to applicators, commercial applicators, businesses that do this.
Do we have any idea how much of this nitrogen fertilizer is applied by professional applicators versus by homeowners?
No, we don't
No.
have that information.
No. I mean, a homeowner's not, they're not going to keep records of it.
Right. I'm trying to get at how we bring, if we do, or how, and if so, how we bring homeowners into this scheme.
Well, I think, Andrew, bringing the homeowners in is going to come from the brochure. It's from educating the homeowners so that they take care of their own property. And
Maybe we go further than that.
In other words, you're suggesting that there be reference to homeowner application in legislation.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm asking the question
It's a good-
because if we have a fair amount of this stuff getting sold at the hardware store and getting improperly applied, either in terms of the density of the application or the time.
I just got to
So
plug
that-
my computer in.
Yeah, so that.
I'm listening.
Yeah, so it washes off, off the property and gets into the storm drains or gets into the waterways and so forth. We should address that.
Mhm. So you are making the suggestion that the homeowner penalty could be explicitly referenced.
Yes, if along with it, there's explicit instruction about how to do it right.
Mhm.
And useful instruction. And that's why I was getting to the whole question of like, where do I set the lever on my machine?
Mhm. So Lisa, the one thing that, we struggle with, you said, we're not lawyers, and we struggle just with process here of, transforming our thoughts into actual legislation that the town, the board will take up and accept. My one reaction I have is, to the degree that we can keep this very, very simple, or as simple as possible, I think we do better. I just also wonder, like, do we have a structure in some way to have a committee that includes legal advice to actually compose this into something that can be handed to Meg and the rest of them?
Well, I did ask Stephen Kiley
Mhm.
about because one of my questions was, if we go back to the language and purpose, or the findings and purpose.
Sorry, Meg, BJ, and the rest of them. She's not done yet.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. I name checked Meg only on the board, and we have 2 board members here.
Okay, yeah, I didn't put this on this for discussion, but I asked the town attorney, because in New York State, the DEC nutrient runoff law, which was effective 2012, states that a local government may enact more stringent standards for the application of fertilizer, provided, and it must demonstrate to the DEC, more stringent standards are necessary to address local water quality conditions.
Mhm.
So I asked Stephen Kiley, what do we have to submit to demonstrate these standards to the DEC? And he said, you have to show empirical information that will allow the town to impose a stricter order of regulation than what the DEC has.
Okay, and with respect to that, I would argue that some of the other stuff that we have, other business that we have going on, does allow us to do that. That the center wastewater, the center water quality testing that we've recently done, that we haven't fully digested, in fact, establishes exactly that higher level of need. Or could be used as an empirical way to establish that higher level of need.
Yeah.
So again, I'm eager to do whatever's useful for you and us in terms of moving this forward. And I'm personally a supporter of the idea that we need a consolidated spot in the town code where fertilizer regulation is referenced and and where homeowners and landscapers can be, a neighbor could say, look at the code, it's right here. You can't do what you're doing. So all good, wanting to do that, wanting to find a practical process to get there, and knowing that some of our other business relates to achieving that. So again, whatever more you feel that is useful, or questions of us, or requests of us, or requests for more resources in some way from the wider community, Lisa, go ahead, but let's close out so that we do in fact cover the waterfront. Ken.
Just a quick one on a comment on your comment, Peter. Also, this seems this is a relatively large and complicated kind of a project here. And I'm wondering if phasing it in would be a way to look at it. To me, like a phase 1 would be just taking what we have on the books that is scattered and getting the town to approve, basically having a subsection of our town code called fertilizer. And then taking what we have existing and putting it under that heading as the beginning of the process, and then add to these regulations depending on what it looks like, if we need to subcategorize it and do some other kinds of things. Because immediately you're going to run into the issue, we have a whole separate set of regulations that are near shore that are buried within it. You know what I mean? So already that it's not one place already in some respects.
So Ken, I think that, you know, is well taken. Phasing is probably a good suggestion. It's the suggestions that we're making, I think, are to this inter subcommittee that's represented here by Lynn and Lisa right now, and Tim. And I think, you know, when I talk about pulling more resources in, they're not just from the WAC, it's from where, you know, we're trying to, there's a reason we're doing this with an inter subcommittee. And that's because, you know, we really want the energy of the larger community and what resources we can bring to bear to actually be able to get this written and put into a form that can be, you know, simple enough in phases or whatever to move into reality rather than just endless discussion. You know, at least I'm impatient too with that. So, okay, so Lynn, Lisa, more that you feel like we should be chewing in this discussion right now?
I just wish we had a lawyer on the water committee that we could, that would advise us rather than the town attorney.
Other than the town attorney. Right, so we should be looking at who in our, you know, range of contacts, who island folks who would, you know, engage with us might be able to bring some legal experience to it. I mean, that's something that, you know, I'll scratch my head around too. I think there are a number of people in the Shelter Island Association who seem to have that kind of background, and so anyway, yeah,
Well,
we do have a need.
I think I just like one thing. In light of the legal questions that need to be answered as to what the town can do, how difficult this is, how big a project this is, does the committee want to submit to the town the proposal for regulation as it stands and give it to the town fathers and say, okay, here, what do you think? What do we need to do? Do we want to do that now? Or do we need to have a consult with the town attorney for him to look at, tell us what to do and go back to the planning stage? I don't know what the will of the town council people is right now. And I think that's just something I'd like to have from, say, Meg, who's there.
Meg, were you tuned in at the moment?
Yeah, just unmuting.
Or BJ, you know, either one.
Yeah.
If you guys are comfortable with what you've put together, you can kick it to the board and Stephen will go over it, let us know what would work, what wouldn't work. We can get some feedback that way, and then we can come back to you with any questions we might have. I don't know if that saves you an extra busy work.
I think it does.
Yeah, so then just send it forward.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Okay. All right. So I would like to propose that we move along in our agenda. And I would like to make we skipped over the water level report. Greg, I'd like to keep this real brief so that we are able to accommodate all the things we have.
I believe I can keep it real brief. There was a remarkable, the big wells stayed basically at the same place that they have been in terms of the percentile. We had a dry November that has now ended with 3 inches of rain and whatever's happened today. So I think, you know, when we get the next set of numbers, we'll be able to see, knock on wood, that things have been, the water levels will have rebounded. Now, Ken provided information, you know, the month to date at the end of November was a low value number. He reported 2.95 inches on the 16th and 17th, plus whatever we've got. We're still going to be below the average. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ken. You know, the average number has not been reached. However, it's, we may get up to 40 inches of rain this year, which would be very good for what we've had a couple of the recent years. The last thing, I guess, is in terms of raw numbers on the big 4 wells. 3 of the wells continue to have a drawdown, and one of them bumped up for the second time. The Goat Hill well is starting to bump up a little bit. So that's about it. That's what I got.
And so we're not looking at this time at any proposal to change our alert levels or any,
I actually left normal on the top of the page here. So I guess what we had guarded, I think, last time.
Mhm.
So I will fix that and then distribute that around.
All right. So, and Ken, did you feel there's something that should be added to that? Or, I mean, we know it rained today. I don't.
Basically, you ask what the latest thing is. Basically, we just got almost 1.7 inches of rain this morning, and which takes us to 39.97 for the year, which gets us closer to the magic number that we like, which is about 45. But we won't get there more than likely, but we are in much better shape. I think we'll with some more rain coming in today, and by the end of the month, we'll probably get to over 40 inches.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to move to the very, very brief, Joe, if you're there with us. Very, very brief. We have the final numbers coming in on the center study, and I think that the center study, how we handle the information that we're digesting with the center study is something that we'll put off till our next meeting, but I wanted Joe to update us on where we're at now that we are at final with data and some of his analysis.
Right. Yeah. So just briefly, the final numbers are in. When we had our discussion last month, we were still waiting for a number of residential test results, and the town building and facilities test results hadn't been added. So that's now compiled, and we don't see any significant changes to the summary tables that would impact the conclusions we discussed about last time. But we do see a refinement of those, and some trends are becoming a bit more clear. So my proposal, I think, is to now take this data and update some visual aids. We'll draw up some maps and try and have a more public ready presentation for our first meeting, or maybe even the second meeting in the new year. And Peter, we could talk about that when we just look at other agenda items. So that's really the news, that there's not that much news.
Oh, okay, but at the same time, because things were so rushed in our last meeting, it was so late in the meeting, we came away, I think, with a little bit of unclarity. I saw that Andrew put up his finger and then his hand. And Andrew had some concern. He came away with the takeaway that there were more wells that had failed on a beyond the 10 milligram nitrogen level than was actually the case with the data. And I shared the raw data with Andrew. I think that if anybody would like to be looking at the raw data and spreadsheets, you should request it. It's worthwhile. We're trying not to, we're respecting privacy. Obviously, everything's anonymous, but we're being careful with this data at the same time. But feel free to request that of me.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give a quick rundown. I mean, sharing the data is no problem. If anybody wants to request it, I'm happy to share it. I think my hesitancy to request it is just to, kind of streamline. There's really not much to take from the raw numbers. There's not any privacy concern either. And I quite literally just have a line item that says the test result and the section of the island that they live in. So I don't know much about the privacy issues, or I don't have any
privacy or even neighborhood sensitivities. So,
sure.
And
nonetheless, I'll just give a quick rundown. Now that the numbers are finalized, I'm looking at the table here, and I'm not even going to pull it up on the screen because I think we don't need to spend that much time on it. But the average failure rate, which includes any number of the categories that were tested, nitrogen, ammonia, MTBE, I'm sorry, not MTB,
Coliform.
MBAS and
Coliform.
coliform,
Bacteria.
right, bacteria. It's just over 10%. The overwhelming majority of those failures are nitrogen and bacteria, and those are indicative of wastewater contamination. The overall percent that's at the action level or failed, action level is half of the failure rate for potability. So potability limit for nitrogen is 10 milligrams per liter. The action level would be 5 milligrams per liter. So the total number of test participants that are at the action level or higher is 51%, and that's largely unchanged since our first discussion. So the numbers have remained fairly consistent. The only thing that's changed since the addition of the new data is we have a more established pocket of higher nitrogen levels, which I think is no surprise.
Right.
So we can now
and
pinpoint
of
that
concern to me, because I live in that pocket. So we do know that in zones 8, 9, 10, and 6, I believe.
6, yeah. So zone 6 has now established itself as the only zone where the average test is above 10. So
Above 10 or above?
above 10, and that's largely due to a handful of extremely high outliers around the school. So it's had an impact on the overall average, but it's also reflective of elevated numbers in the region as a whole.
Right, and we see the impact of water flow mapping that we've begun to understand better into that 6, 8, 10, 9, 10 Fresh Pond, Menantic Creek zone from this tracing from the center.
That's
and
right.
from the dense area of town.
Yep.
Andrew's got his hand up and waiting patiently.
So, many of you know this, I used to run a water company that served a couple of 100,000 people. And if we had neighborhoods that where we were serving water that was above the maximum contaminant level for something, that was a big deal in the water company. And it necessitated public notice, and it necessitated some pretty prompt corrective measures to deal with it. So we're not running a water company. These are individual wells that people use and are responsible to maintain. And so that is different. But for me, and now this is personal opinion, but for me, there is a obligation on the part of the community to deal with this, because we know that a measurable percentage of our homeowners are pulling water out of their own wells that would violate an MCL. And in my old days, I would have a very strong sense of urgency on dealing with this.
And
I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure.
I share your urgency more than anybody, but
right,
okay, but I'm going to cut you off just slightly because we are going to come back to this topic. We're not letting go of our sense of urgency. My sense of urgency is extremely strong. I live right in the midst of this, like we said, this pocket where the level, 80% failure rate in terms of one or the other measure. And I'm among my home is among those homes that have had failure. Levels. We're not letting this go by any means. However, we've got a big balancing act to do. And so we've done a good job with center testing, and we will come back. We're not closing the topic at all. We're coming back to it in the next 2 meetings. However, we also have been having a discussion that we need a similar testing program of some sort for the nearshore areas, that they're also impacted, and in many ways the impacts on them may be more severe because I can drink bottled water, but in areas that have saltwater intrusion, their whole systems may be, showers may be impacted, their pipes and all of that sort of stuff. So I'd like to temporarily close the topic of the center system testing, or not center systems, center high nitrogen triangle testing, and ask about.
Can I ask one question
Yeah,
on
go
that?
ahead, Greg.
Maybe first of all, I would love to see the numbers, Joe, but perhaps all the committee members may wish that. Second, does the data have the results for the wells that are the municipal water supplies?
It
So
does
that's
now,
included
yeah.
in the data?
When you say municipal water supplies, you mean for the town buildings, not for the
The town
town?
buildings, yeah.
Yep, that's included now.
Great. That's it.
But they're not identifiable, I should say, Greg. I mean, they're in their
Not
respective
identifiable?
zones, but the data is not identifiable by address, like the rest of the.
So you'll know that the center, the zone.
Can I request that you put, could I request that you put that's our information. There's no.
Yeah, that's separate.
That would be-
I guess I
nice
didn't
to
mention,
have
I
those
just said that
numbers
because it seemed
because-
like you were seeking that specific town data. So, when looking at the list, it's not, none of the test results are identifiable by address, but I can share, certainly we can share the town testing information.
Because we own those. That's our well. As residents of the town.
There wouldn't be, Joe, is there any reason why we couldn't have an asterisk on the ones that are municipal buildings in some fashion?
Yeah, we could do whatever we like, but certainly, Greg, that information is always available to you. So I don't, you didn't need to wait for this exercise, to look at it, and it's done on an ongoing basis for, regular compliance. So
If feasible, a couple of years, I don't know how, the last three results per building would be probably the thinking is that one of the reasons that we're doing all this testing is to understand the flow of nitrates and things like that. And that we've talked about that spine, which is the municipal buildings, as being a key source of that. And it's, that's the head of the snake, as it were. Now,
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know that I would have, I don't know that I would define that as the purpose of the study, but certainly that's another conclusion, we can look to draw from it. I mean, what we have from the study now really best reflects a snapshot of how many of our neighbors have potable water, or they don't have potable water. So it would be pretty hard from this data to, I think, draw specific conclusions about flow patterns or residency time, and we have that those analyses are done, specifically with those objectives in mind. This test, I think, can help support some of those conclusions, but we're not going to be able to draw, distinct flow patterns from this data, mostly because it's not even pinpointed in terms of location. But
right.
Here's your walk away, bullet point is. 1 in 10 people who participated in the test have non-potable water for one reason or another, and half of them, 51% of them, have water that either is not potable or they need to do something about it. So, those are I think the key takeaways that we can boil down.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so again, I'm only rushing us a little bit because we have another guest who I'd like to give time to, and I don't want to let go of the idea that we have other testing to do besides just the center. So I'm not sure if in the next 5 minutes that I think we have to allocate to this, that we can come up with a great plan for how nearshore testing for saltwater intrusion and the impacts of chlorides and stuff like that can and should be done. But I'd like to just open up the floor for a few minutes for that topic.
Let me jump in on that, Peter. We have a great document that was performed by a consultant for the town, evaluating the irrigation law that went into effect over a decade ago now. And in that analysis is a pretty robust discussion about chloride testing and historic chloride testing on the island. So I actually think there's a pretty helpful roadmap to how we might do our own testing on a residential level. And the added benefit would be repeating potentially what was already done several decades ago. if we can simulate that testing protocol and those results, not only does it add another data point on perhaps a trend line, but we have the added benefit of comparing apples to apples in terms of our test results.
So could you share with the committee
Yeah.
in that?
Yep.
Yeah, that would be great. I will mention what I've mentioned before, which is separately, we have a potential proposal from the USGS to do further electromagnetic study of the saltwater freshwater interface boundaries. So again, something I think we'll have to come back to in subsequent meetings. But I know, Doug, you were very concerned that we also do testing for near shore. It's, we're balancing communities here. Did you have any thoughts or comments about near shore testing?
Just that we should be doing it. And just one more anecdote regarding the visit with the Corbetts. Joe mentioned that they were going to drill another well. Well, the reason they can drill another well is they own another lot across the street from their home. So this is not a situation where they can put in another well bore on their existing property. Not everyone has the luxury of an additional undeveloped lot adjacent to where they live. And Hidden Path, it turns out, has several properties without good quality water. So this is a really pressing issue for that community. Lord knows where else that might exist, both in Silver Beach as well as island-wide. So I definitely think this is something that we should pursue on a town-wide basis.
Okay, well taken. Okay, so with that, I see Kate has turned on her video, and everything is not gloom and doom, it appears. So Kate, would you give us a little bit of a sense of what's been happening in the shellfish seeding study?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me join you. And I think that with regards to this group in particular, what we can take away from the experience we've had, specifically with the scallops this year on Shelter Island, is taking methodologies that are known and proven and applying them appropriately. And while you can never be guaranteed success, you can, at least count on it a little bit. So just, yep, sorry.
Or hope for it, at least.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. So just to get everyone up to speed, what I'm talking about in particular was in 2022, September 2022, the shellfish hatchery at the Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program hatchery in Southold, we had an abundance of scallop bugs that we were run out of space, and got permission to start a scallop spawner sanctuary, which just means, again, this is methodology that I didn't invent, I didn't create it. It's actually my colleague and predecessor, Steve Tettelback. He really spearheaded this methodology, although he's such a humble man, he probably wouldn't even take credit for it. It just means you take a small area, in this case in Cockles Harbor, it was just 20 meters by 20 meters, and you just densely seed that designated area that's just marked off with 4 corner buoys, densely seed it. So you just throw the individual shellfish overboard in that set area. We thought it was going to be 40,000 scallops. So target was 100, I believe 100 individuals per meter squared. And ended up being closer to 70,000. So we seeded 70,000 scallop bugs in this only 20 meter by 20 meter area. That's usually when people, particularly baymen or fishermen, hear the word sanctuary, it's a turnoff, because it's, yet another area where they can't fish, right? But the driving force behind my work is to support the fishermen and the baymen. So it was a much more palatable size, I got them behind it. They just had to not enter this one 20 meter by 20 meter area, And lo and
Right in the
behold,
middle of Cockles Harbor?
right, on the sand flat, as it's referred to, but, initially I was looking at a more shallow area, but one bayman pointed out that perhaps it would be too shallow, get really too knocked around by storms or gulls. So I moved it a little farther off the sand flat, closer to Cockles Harbor Marina, just where it starts to slope down. And, you know, at first in the spring, one of my colleagues, Harrison Toby, he's like, does more of the scallop research work. He dove down on that area, and it was a little disheartening when we could find 0 scallops in this area. That being said, he also said he didn't see any evidence of dead scallops or crushed shell, so they just were gone. Interestingly enough, in Shinnecock Bay, where we also were utilizing this method of scallop sanctuaries, he had the same experience. They were just gone. So we're like, all right, well, maybe this wasn't the best area. When in fact, it turns out that right in that area of Cockles Harbor, right just a little bit closer to the head of the harbor road, is where everyone was able to harvest the scallops this year. I was getting reports that 3 days, everyone who's going out there was maxing out. So what a success story that is. And I think in part, it's, like I said, just taking methodologies that we know work in other areas, that we've tried in other areas, and just applying it here and choosing the right site, you know, getting the bayman behind it. And also it's an area where we know there's eelgrass, which is important habitat. So what's
I
that?
was going to ask about the relationship with eelgrass here.
Yeah, eelgrass is critical habitat for scallops. Turns out where we, you know, it's hard to know exactly where you're putting these things from just jumping on out of a boat. It turns out where we put those scallops, there was not a lot of eelgrass, but we suspect that the reason we didn't see them is that they swam away. They can swim. They swam and went to where the eelgrass was.
They found their way.
Arrived, and there we go.
You got close enough.
Yeah. Thank you for the thumbs up.
But so was this, did you have other sanctuaries? Were there other locations that were?
Not in Shelter Island waters.
Mhm.
So we did then later in the fall and or really winter, in November, we did have larger scallops to seed in 2022, but we didn't seed them anywhere near there. So I think that's really interesting that, you know, it seems that they did better being seeded in a high density area and just being kind of one area being left alone for a season, as opposed to this more broad distribution. So something to keep in mind.
Mhm. Mhm. And so, yeah, so where to now for 2023, 2024?
Yeah, so unfortunately, 2023 was a difficult year for producing scallops. We, as it's been reported, experienced an unusual die-off early in the year. We think that it was when we got a real heat spike. That being said, we, you know, haven't stopped trying, you know, so we're actually have adult scallops in the hatchery conditioning. It's the term that we use to kind of slowly get them to start thinking that it's getting closer to spawning. So we just feed them a whole lot and keep them in warmer temperatures, increasingly warmer temperatures. So we with my colleague Harrison, who's, like I said, is on the research side of things, we work very closely together. They're finding slightly more resilient populations of scallops in certain water bodies. So we're going to try this one population that was found from, I believe, Moriches Bay area. They seem to have survived slightly better out in the wild. So we're going to try spawning them and try to, you know, dial in those genetics. So we'll see.
And would the plan be to repeat the same work in the
That would be
same
the
area?
idea.
In the
That-
same
that-
area or other, or?
That would have to
Interesting.
be a discussion with the town, the Baymen, see how many we have to work with. But ideally, and this is just based off of my experience working with the East Hampton Town Shellfish Hatchery, we utilize the methodology of scallop spawner sanctuaries in 3 Mile Harbor and Napeak Harbor. And we repeated that for many years, 6 years maybe. And we saw incredible success through that. So ideally, yes, you would keep doing it in the same area. And the idea is then they'll spawn and then increase the population enough that it'll be self-sustaining.
And you know, what you were saying before about them migrating, finding their own habitat. It just seems to me that we would need, you know, they need to be close enough to a possible, you know, to a place that they're comfortable.
Sure, yeah.
So is there any, I mean, I'm looking for more kind of recommendations about, given what we saw happening, you know, should we be looking for habitat potential locations?
Sure, well, that's where, you know, myself with my colleagues, we like to focus all of our restoration activities at least in close proximity to each other. So my colleagues who are on the habitat team, the eelgrass team, they executed a number of, I believe, 6 different planting sites of eelgrass this fall around the island. They'll go around, check on them in the spring. And then also they'll do a round of a different kind of eelgrass methodology called BUDS, or buoy deployed system. So later in I think in the spring. And then just kind of check on that. And it's always a work in progress. We're always working very closely with each other and reporting back to each other. So yeah, long story short is we would be looking to seed the scallops in among with the eelgrass, whether
Right.
already existing or newly restored.
So could could I ask you to kind of relay to us, as you're having information about what's succeeding and not, or even just where you're trying with the eelgrass seeding program, you know, areas. Because again, what you do, you know, it's what we're all doing is in coordination with each other, or could ideally be in coordination with each other. There's, you know, land preservation, and there's an enormous land preserve recently at along Menantic that, you know, suggests to me an area of interest. You know, again, I would just be interested in, you know, where it's looking like there's potentially interesting stuff going on, that we can examine what's happening around that with land usage, with runoff, with fertilizer restrictions, things like that.
Sure, yeah, and all of those factors play an important role in what type of restoration activities are best for a certain area, you know.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you, Andrew, for the thumbs up. Okay, yeah, and really congratulations. I mean, it's really, you know.
Yeah, it's nice. Now it's just the pressure of you know, maintaining that. I hope that we can, despite not having scallops to seed this year, I hope that we can still see something that we can maintain in years.
Yeah, I think it's very important. It's important for us to celebrate what you're doing and and where there's success, because I mean, I remember BJ coming to us at a certain point with one of the Baymen saying, well, it's too late.
Right.
You know, well, you can't do anything anymore. And that kind of attitude, you know, then funding dries up and the energy dries up, because, you know, it feels like it's too late, but it's not. So yeah, Doug.
Thanks for the work. Really great, Kate. Have you got any feedback from Shelter Island Baymen to this exercise that you could share with us?
Yes, yeah. I reached out, had a number of conversations. I even was kind of fishing for like whether or not I could claim that those scallops were mine, and a number of the guys I talked to were like, absolutely, like there's no doubt, it makes complete sense. Like the A to B logic is kind of hard to argue with. It's like, yay. So, yeah.
Yay, indeed. We do this in I have some communities I'm in instead of applauding.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Oh,
Andrew.
you have another question?
How does the scalloping affect the eelgrass?
If it's done right, it shouldn't affect it at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's improper moorings, the chains dragging, that's really a big one. Or just, yeah, improper dredging. You shouldn't have your dredge just fully scraping the bottom and digging up the roots. I'm sure it happens, but I trust that our guys know what they're doing.
Weren't crabs a big problem at one time, and in these barren areas where there's no food, you put in the eelgrass and all of a sudden they just clip that stuff right off at the base?
Yeah, it's not great. And I heard reports that on the other side of Cockles Harbor, closer to Taylor's Island, one guy was just pulling up dredges full of spider crabs, which doesn't bode well. But it's just kind of one of those, kind of keep listening to these stories and keeping tabs on it. And, it could have just been a great year for spider crabs, and maybe next year, the natural ebb and flow of the population dynamics. But
There's a lot of hungry critters out there.
yeah.
There are a lot of critters out there, and we often don't say because some things seem too obvious to us because our heads are too deep into this. The impact of scallops on the water quality.
Yeah, they're actually, everyone loves talking about oysters as being the water quality powerhouse. The fact that people like to throw around is an adult oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day. I was finding in research a couple years ago that scallops are actually even better filters. If you think about it, they're very mobile. They have therefore like a higher metabolism, so they filter more. They have to eat more, so it kind of makes sense. Like, oh, right, but scallops are a lot harder to grow than oysters. So,
But in terms of our work, improving the nitrogen quality flowing out into our bays and
yes,
stuff
exactly.
like that.
Yeah, so you have that's why.
Impact.
Yeah, so multi-species restoration. So, hard clams also excellent filters. They also help aerate the sediment for the eelgrass. It's an ecosystem approach. So taking not just, like I said, not just what's happening in the water and how those species work together, but also factoring in the upland effects on that waterway. So yeah.
So Kate, big applause.
Thank you. And if anyone has any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you want to quickly jot down my email address, it's kr474@cornell.edu.
And I think we will reach out to you across the 2024. So
sure. Cool.
All right.
Well, enjoy the rest of your meeting. I'm gonna.
Well, and we're now we have come through our agenda, and it is
amazing.
exactly 3:30.
Excellent. Well done.
So I
I'm
feel a
impressed
little
with the
bit
management.
proud of that. Folks, new business, anything need to be mentioned that you feel like we haven't? Kate, thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop off.
Yeah.
I have one
Lisa.
quick question, and that is, it was asked of us to look into this a long time ago. And I'm just wondering if there's been any movement or thought, and that's the irrigation law.
Anybody? Any movement or thought on the irrigation? Joe's popping.
I'll just say that the timing's impeccable with, I just shared and distributed the consultant's report from 2014 about irrigation. So I think the conclusions and the testing done in there would be very helpful for us to read if you haven't seen this report before. But it's a great premise to further discussion about irrigation. So I would say it's necessary reading for the group if we want to take on that conversation more thoroughly.
Meg.
I'd also like to add that Suffolk County just updated its irrigation law and is requiring smart irrigation So I will share that with everybody. I've already kind of taken a stab at modifying our current irrigation code in preparation for some conversations that Jerry had had earlier in the year. So I can send along some of the ideas I had, which incorporated adoption of the Suffolk County law concepts into our code.
All right,
Yeah,
sounds like we're building an agenda item, follow-up agenda item here, so.
Yeah, I'd also add there are recommendations in that irrigation study that were not included in the initial irrigation law. So there is some already parsed through recommendations from the consultant that we could take up, right away for discussion.
In what you distributed.
Yes.
Okay, great. And
So this is a 2014 irrigation study that was a precursor to the abandoning the 10-year
Yes,
drop off.
yeah,
This was the independent study that fed the irrigation committee. I guess it was the backbone of their decision making for
Right,
this
that,
policy.
I think
So,
that
yeah.
was a 2014 study.
Yeah,
That's
and
in our
I'll tell you
study.
that there are certainly things that the committee, and I don't know the historical context on this, but there are certainly things
Yeah,
the committee did not incorporate, whether that was by
Mhm.
public demand or by their own judgment. So what I think that's useful for is it's leaving the door open for for discussion about those topics
Right.
specifically, because they're totally relevant now.
yeah, that's available to read in under studies in our database, basically.
Do you know who wrote that study?
Yeah,
Nelson, I think it was either Nelson, it was a
Joe has it.
Nelson Pope, I think.
Nelson Pope? Okay.
Wait.
no, it's
the other
it was
one?
done by
Who?
Leggett's
Leggett?
Cheers.
I'd have to look a second.
Graham.
Leggett Brashear, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you in a second.
And Andrew has had his hand up.
So we have some new members of the town board.
Mhm.
And is there any thought given to bringing them up to speed on what we're discussing? Because our own knowledge of these issues that we've been discussing has certainly progressed. And I'm sure the new members of the town board have a number of other things they've got that are on their plate. And the issues we're discussing should be too. And have we got any briefings planned? Is that something, Peter, you're going to undertake? Or?
That's a great suggestion. I do want to point out that one of our new board members is a graduate of the Water Advisory Committee, Al Dickinson. That said, he hasn't been on the Water Advisory Committee for many years. He was on the board in between and then off the board for a period of time. Ben Diet has never been, as far as I know, he's never been attended a Water Advisory Committee meeting in a briefing capacity or in any way. So I think that that's probably a very good suggestion. And even though her name doesn't seem correct, I see Amber, our new supervisor, has just popped on visually. So maybe Amber, did you have some thoughts?
Yes, and I apologize for the name. I don't know why my daughter's name is showing up on my iPad. But my town laptop has been fixed. I was informed while this was going on. So, but anyways, my plan is in the new year is to have all committee chairs come together for a committee chair meeting to brief the new town board members on where everybody stands. And it's also always a good opportunity for each committee chair to understand what the other committees are doing. So it's a little bit of cross-pollination. So that may be in the 2nd to 3rd week of January.
So, well, and again, that'll be committee chairs. You can feed me, guys, in terms of things you'd like me to mention in that context. But beyond that, and we don't know exactly how liaisons will be set up.
No, I'm still waiting to hear back from Benjamin and Albert as to what committees they're interested in. So then I can go ahead and make the designations for the liaisons across all committees.
And then I think Andrew's point is well taken. We would love to have the opportunity to invite them and brief them, as on where things have been over these last couple of years.
Yes, and they can yes, they can always, reach out and attend any of the meetings themselves and go back and look at any of the old tapes.
Okay. All right, folks. I think we've had a very successful, good meeting. Anything else? Anybody in the public or anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak at all? Anyone want to, before we close the meeting? We're all good. Everybody's good. All right. So motion to adjourn.
And I do have one thing. Merry
Yeah,
Christmas,
Greg, go
Happy New
ahead.
Year. See you.
Yes,
2024.
yes. And I wrote it in my email, peace on earth and goodwill to all. Okay, motion to adjourn, second. I'm sure we're all in favor. Guys, have a great holiday.
Hey, yeah, happy holidays,
We'll
guys.
talk soon. Thanks, Dave.